cats, children, as well as babies. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the Driveline Academy podcast, the world's most dangerous youth baseball podcast and the world's most dangerous youth podcast room. Because what changes form more often than our podcast room?
Truly.
We are here in a new space, in beautiful 4K if you're joining us that way. Cameras all around us, lights all around us. It kind of looks semi-professional in here. I'm your host, Devin Morgan, Director of Baseball Driveline, founder of the Driveline Academy. I'm joining us per usual by my brother, my partner, my co-host, Driveline Academy Assistant Director, Driveline Academy International. Fumbled right at the end, Jeremy Tactile.
That was pretty good.
The pace was there.
Yeah, the pace was there.
The pace is there.
It's been a couple weeks where
it has. You got to get your reps in, got to build the chronic volume. We're going to talk about this a little bit. But first, housekeeping. Long-time listeners, first-time listeners, last-time listeners know that we start each podcast with a housekeeping. This is either stuff that we promote to generate funds for our foundation. For our fund that goes to serve kids that want to do this at a discounted or no rate. You can read into that little sausage fest by your boy here as a little bit of foreshadowing. Maybe, maybe not. Who knows?
A Freudian slip there.
Freudian slip. Or we're just talking about stuff that you guys can use to engage with Driveline, whether you want to do a little bit of Driveline, whether you do a lot of it of Driveline. We have all of those things. So the first thing is our good friends over at Axe and Jay and the whole squad over at AxeBat. If you go to axebat.com, code DL20 will get you 20% off. Discombobulate loop-de-loop 20. I did the clog thing to just spin up a bunch of ridiculous words. So discombobulate loop-de-loop 20, or a D and an L and a 2 and a 0 will get you 20% off at axebat.com. Training bats, game bats, accessories, all the things from our friends at Axe. And beyond that, it's just like this suite of Driveline materials that we have. I don't really have them behind me or
they're behind me.
I guess they're behind Jeremy way back there. Well, it's your shot. It's that way. So anyways, what they are,
I'm no fan of white.
Yeah, I will to my camera. The Skills to Complete Youth Baseball Training Manual. If you want all the stuff about what we believe to be true about youth baseball in one place, you just get the book. Get the book. And we've been running the book on sale. We're running a whole bunch of seasonal stuff right now. I think there's another 2 days of sales, maybe. Just get the book. It's literally like a textbook, like a college textbook level investment in your development as a youth coach, which is probably a good thing if you're going to be in this space for a few years. Beyond that, Youth Power Bat, it's good. It's going to develop bat speed. Bat speed is good. It's going to help you hit the balls harder and farther. Youth Underload Smash Bat, going to develop super maximal bat speed and barrel accuracy because it's a skinny barrel, small ball. You do the math. Driveline Academy Flex. If you're close to a local Driveline Academy gym in Kent, Washington, Scottsdale, Arizona, or Tampa, Florida, come into the gym 5 times a month, work with a trainer all month, periodized programming, meaning you get better, assessments and training integrated into your game or practice schedule. That's the best way to do that. You can come in and do the one-time thing, which is the snapshot assessment. It's a 90-minute biomechanics assessment for your youth player. So metrics on the hitting side, metrics on the throwing side, force plate data, all the ingredients you need to understand how you perform right now and also why. I think that's it. I think that's it. It should be enough. All right. So I said to Jeremy last week, I was like, I don't want to talk about bunting. And I don't want to talk about workload. And I don't want to talk about these things that longtime listeners know that we have really turned into horse glue at this stage. So I said, you guys tell me what type of questions you have, and we have a bunch of them. I don't even know if we might have to break this Q&A episode into like 2. And I'm sure that someone's going to have some bunting-related questions, so maybe we'll get into that. Because Jeremy loves bunting, as we established. For anybody that follows Driveline Youth Social, at Driveline Youth on Twitter, on Facebook, and on Instagram. Let's get into it. So, Jack McCann, this is an easy one. How do you manage tournament baseball weekends for athletes wearing a pulse? Is each day one session or each game? I think you got to treat it game by game, because if you're wearing a pulse and you're using that data correctly, then I think the workload you accumulate from game 1 of a single day is going to inform the choices you make about game 2, right?
Yes.
I mean, I guess it's kind of both, right?
I mean, what I would even, the truest answer I have for you is not really doable, because the truest answer is anybody.
Oh, okay. Let's go.
Right? Like, if we're actually going to do this, it should be inning by inning. because a lot of guys after they're done pitching are going to go play another position.
So would you
or a reliever may not start, sitting on the bench waiting until he relieves. He might be playing short and then coming in to relieve afterwards. So it's helpful to know what his workload has looked like to that point before he gets in the bump. Now, I fully understand that is very difficult to do.
Labor intensive.
Labor intensive. And one of the things that we haven't talked about in this podcast that makes this whole thing really difficult is you shouldn't wear your pulse while you're hitting.
Yes, unless you have a system to know when to discard that data.
Sure,
and
to time skip it and remove those throws, which is not the easiest thing if you're not a drive-on employee, right?
Yeah.
So it is difficult to do during games because there's they are constantly taking it on and putting it off, taking it on and taking it off.
Not very common.
So that does complicate things, and the other part of this, which if you have a pulse and have not yet gotten the firmware update, you should.
Oh, is that out yet?
I'm pretty sure it's out.
Is it out? Okay.
At least one of them, I think, is already out, or it's coming, and I'm
foreshadowing just like I did with the other thing.
But we have massively increased the battery life on Pulse, which was a pretty big problem for tournament baseball because there was no sleep setting on Pulse, and the battery life wasn't crazy long. And without it going to sleep, generally you're going to be, if you wear it for warm-ups, you might make it to the second game of a doubleheader, but it's not going to make it all the way through the second game of a doubleheader.
And now you're trying to charge pulse sensors
in between games and
Anyways.
The longer battery life makes it possible to do that, to really have it for both games of a doubleheader. And then a lot of fields don't have plugs where you could literally plug it in and charge. Not every field's going to have electricity. And the other big thing, if we're going to do this, and depending on how old your team is, and the percentage of your kids that have cell phones that can actually sync their pulse data on a game-to-game, or even inundating is probably not going to happen, but on a game-to-game basis, you're going to, if you want to use that pulse data for the next game, you have to sync it in between games immediately.
Yeah.
If you have a team of 10, 11, 12-year-olds, probably not going to have phones, probably not syncing that pulse data in between games.
You got to find parents.
You either got to find a parent or have an iPad where you can team sync, and then you need Wi-Fi. So there's a lot of complications there that I would suggest the best way to do this is probably actually to go day by day.
Yeah.
It's less valuable information than game to game or inning to inning. It doesn't mean it's not valuable to say, hey, this is what his workload was for the full day yesterday, and then inform that to make your decisions for the previous day.
Sure. So basically we're kind of coming down to there's a best use case to execute this, but it's incredibly labor and time sensitive. So let's pivot day by day. Yeah. Which makes sense.
Yeah.
And we're back. Did we actually answer that question? Yeah, kind of.
Yeah,
kind of mostly. Yeah. Okay. Done deal.
I feel good about it.
Done deal. Jack coaches 2028, 2029. So those are 13, 14s, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think there's a best case scenario, and there's also just hey, do it by day and try to make the best educated decision you can about if you have 2 games in a single day about, hey, maybe you spot check your shortstop's pulse data after game 1, right? That's if you have to pivot there.
Yeah, and if you have it lined up, who's pitching in game 2, you can make sure that they sync in between games or whatnot, so you can see that data.
Yeah, but right now I think managing that data from pulse at scale can be a little labor intensive.
Mm-hmm. Especially the younger you get and the lower percentage of them that have phones, it becomes a much harder task for sure.
Yeah. Ask us how we know about how hard that is. Okay, Dan Dan's the man. Dan says, when prepping for season and in season, how much time do you spend on specialized fielding positions, i.e. first base, outfield, versus core skill development, hitting the ball hard, throwing the ball far?
Literally 1/4.
Yeah, it's about 25%.
25%.
Right?
We have 4 practices a week. One of them is outdoors where we focus on fielding. And the other 3 are indoors where we focus on the skill of hitting it hard and hitting it flush and throwing it hard and throwing it accurately.
Yeah. And so I guess a good follow-up question there is when it comes to that on-field, how much time you think is an ideal to spend about like specialized position stuff, about like your first base and
Sure.
some of that stuff where, look, if you have a competent first baseman, it's going to help the rest of your team. If you have an underdeveloped first baseman, you're going to give away some outs, and like that sucks.
Yeah. I think, especially the younger you get, the more frustrating it is to have a catcher who struggles to catch the ball and a first baseman who struggles to catch it, because you get a weak ground ball, it's a success, and then you make an error, and it's pretty demoralizing. You strike a kid out, but you can't actually glove it.
Yeah.
Drop third strikes. Now that kid's on base, and then everyone's stealing all over the place if your catcher isn't great at securing the ball.
Yeah.
So like at a younger age, for sure, those two we do dedicate a little bit more time to, especially catching.
Yeah.
And we have, it's kind of up to our head coaches on where they feel like kids are developmentally, and like if these are the kids that I'm planning on playing at first, we got like two lefties that are gonna have to play first or whatever. We have a little, those are things that you can do indoors on recovery days that don't require additional throwing or anything like that. Working on footwork around the bag, working on picks, things like that. Catching, we do drills with plyos, things like that. We rarely do like infield drills indoors. We have the ability to, we have the space to. Some of our coaches do. Most of our coaches don't spend a significant amount of time on making sure, we can field balls really, really well.
Yeah, your indoor time is just like there's probably some higher ROI on the stuff that you really can maximize when you're indoors, right?
I feel, and I know you do pretty strongly, that like the best way to get better at fielding is be a better athlete and have a stronger arm and give yourself a little bit more time to make mistakes, right?
Yeah.
Like if you kick a ball, but keep it in front of you and your arm is strong, you still might get that guy out if you can get to it quickly and throw it over. Hinging, which is a thing that you do in throwing and hitting, that we put our kids in the weight room and make sure we try to make sure they're good at hinging. Hinging helps field too, right? Getting into a low position. So like we work on fielding, but not actually like by hitting them fungos or ground balls. Like rising tide lifts all boats, and like being a better athlete just is you're going to get to balls quicker because you're a little bit more agile. You're going to be in a better position to field them, and your arm is going to be stronger, so you'll be able to get away with fewer mistakes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think when I was still coaching just like rec ball. I think part of the way that I solved this was just like a fairly constant amount of rotation from position to positions. Yeah. And I guess what you're trying to do there is you're giving them a strong dose of fielding variability, right? And a small dose of fielding specificity. And that was a thing that in a little league container, you don't have enough practice time up front to even establish competitiveness from practice 1 to practice 6, because your game is literally like less than 2 weeks from when you form your team.
Sure.
So then to me, it was like, all right, well, the reason that something like the Youth Baseball Dev Cert talks a lot about like positional rotations in the Skills to Scale book is because of the reality of those type of season containers. And I would honestly say that like if I was coaching like a 12U tournament club select team, whatever you would call it, I would probably want to do the same thing, because I don't know how those kids are going to look when they're 14, 15 and they show up their high school baseball tryout, and you have to have a little bit more clearly defined path about like where is your roster spot. But I can tell you also that as a parent of a kid who was as a child who was on the varsity team as a freshman, the reason he found that spot is he could kind of play anywhere, right? He's like, my kid is, if there's one spot that he's actually uncomfortable on the field, and I wouldn't even say that he's uncomfortable, it's playing first. And that's only because he just hasn't done it a ton, because he got a really good dosing of everything else. But even as a first baseman, what's that job, right? That job is footwork, blocking a little bit like a catcher, and reading hops, right? I mean, and you're kind of reading hops from a static position because you want to stay on there. To your point, getting low on a ball, trying to read it, are you gaining ground, or are you giving up ground with your glove because you can't gain ground or give up ground with your feet? Is that not informed by being a shortstop, kind of? Is that not informed by like getting a hard liner at third? I just
Sure. I mean, there's like, we talk about the defensive spectrum, right? Yeah. And like, up the middle positions, like if you're if you train every kid to play center field and shortstop,
yes,
then they can play first base without a problem. And you don't have to necessarily have the specificity of first base. Now, if you got a couple lefties, you're probably not going to train them to play shortstop. So I understand getting them a little bit more position specific work at first base, footwork, short ops, things like that at first base. If you have a lefty who's just not going to play shortstop ever.
Yeah.
But but I think you're not 100% right on Danny's playing varsity because he can play a bunch of different positions and got to fit it anywhere. There's definitely a part of that, sure. But is he even getting that look if he doesn't hit the ball hard in the first place?
Oh, no, you're right. I'm not under-indexing for that. I'm saying that,
I just want to make sure that, that
you're right.
I say that part, because, that is kind of our philosophy, is that, we might not have the teams with the highest fielding percentages, and we might not be giving high school coaches the world's best fielders. So we are giving high school coaches guys that they will figure out, and they will work with them on defense, because I have to get this kid's bat in my line.
So I think it's interesting that we're actually coming to that point, and I'm going to pivot off of some of the Q&A stuff to get right into this. We were driving to school this morning, and Danny got his form clearances done, so he's all ready to participate in baseball. And my wife, on the drive, very jokingly and sarcastically goes, "We hope you make the team." Yeah. And we all had a good laugh.
Yeah.
Right? And I thought about it, and I'm like, that laugh is a luxury.
Mm-hmm.
That laugh is a luxury. And I recognize that there's a lot of kids that aren't in that spot.
Yeah.
I recognize there's a lot of kids who don't have the ability to feel like it's a foregone conclusion that they're going to make a high school baseball team in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And that sucks. That straight up sucks, because again, we know the numbers of kids who fall off when that stuff happens.
Yeah. You can be a terrific outfielder and a vacuum on the infield. And if you can't throw the ball very hard, you're a second baseman.
Right.
Or a left fielder. And if you can't hit the ball very hard, you're going to come off the bench as a defensive replacement.
Right.
You're not going to have a spot in the starting lineup. If you hit the ball really hard but aren't very good defensively, they'll find a spot for you.
They're going to find a spot.
And you're going to get extra work, and maybe you make a couple more errors than another kid might, but you're going to provide more value by hitting the ball hard.
Yeah, and I think the tricky thing to kind of wrap your head around here is that you have to have some amount of risk tolerance for maybe not achieving the ultimate level in so much as you could of fielding development, because you recognize there's more leverage on this other side.
Mm-hmm.
And for those kids that are going into high school baseball tryouts where they don't have the luxury of assuming that there's a roster spot on there, I think works downstream to we got to think about what the point of this whole thing is. And there's a guy, not a guy that I know, but a guy who posted something the other day, and it actually got a decent amount of traction. And it goes, "Travel ball is not handing colleges ready-made players anymore. You're going to have to actually coach and teach, or you will lose in an embarrassing fashion."
And he's talking about at the college level you have to coach and teach?
Yes. Yeah. So... And again, world's most dangerous youth baseball podcast, man of many opinions. I do think that it's reasonable to consider what the role of travel and select baseball is in this point, because if you have a choice between spending all your time and creating a ready-made college player, the first thing that we have to talk about is what does that mean?
I was just saying, what does that even mean?
What does that mean? Yeah. Because I don't have time. Consider that you just don't have time to do everything, right? You don't. And the reason that all these kids are super attracted to the 3 things you need to throw 5 miles an hour harder, or the 7 things you need to do to be a better hitter. And there's all this flaw fix dogma in marketing that kind of acknowledges that I can't do everything, so I need to hack my way around this, right?
Sure.
And I think the only thing that we are kind of definitively saying is we don't need to do the gimmicky hack. We just have to acknowledge that one or 2 of these things are more important than the other. And I'll actually go 3 of those things: athletic development, and then baseball throwing skill and baseball hitting skill.
Yeah.
And that's just, I'm sorry, but I think the evaluation landscape and what we're hearing from coaches at the collegiate professional level is that they're willing to accept that. Some of them.
Right.
The smart ones.
Right. And like I would just like to ask more questions of like what does that mean to be a ready-made college baseball player? Because like what we're looking at now in today's college baseball landscape, to me, the first thing that you need to be like, if we're talking a ready-made player, my assumption is a kid as a freshman that you can give playing time to.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Is that kid 170 pounds? Is he 165 pounds? No, he's probably 190, depending on the position, 200, you know. That's a ready-made college baseball player. Not necessarily a kid who's 155, but doesn't make any errors.
Right.
So like, what part are we teaching? Like, is he saying we need to teach them athleticism, or is he more along the lines of like travel ball doesn't teach fielding anymore?
And that's what it effectively it kind of went. I don't want to say it devolved into, but like that's what the conversation kind of went into. It's just like, well, you know, we're not producing players that have an awareness of how to compete at that level, right? Which is not the first time or the second or the fifth time that I've heard that. But again, the thing I'm going to point to is that like if 95% of high school baseball players don't play college, so that means that the college baseball competitive environment is hyper concentrated of the top 5% of all high school baseball players.
You need to be able to hit it hard, you need to be able to throw it hard, and you need to be able to be a good enough athlete and have enough size on you to actually contribute to your team. And like, it matters a lot less if you make few errors.
Because how are you going to find that competitive level of stress test in travel baseball nowadays, in club baseball nowadays? You can't, because everybody has a roster spot so long as they pay. You know, like if there was a period of time where travel ball was a very, very select thing that was open for a very small percentage of the population, those days are over.
Yes.
Right? Those days are over. So I understand what you're saying, that like, hey, you know, travel ball doesn't prepare college-ready athletes. I do think you have to ask yourself, like, what does that really mean of the things that we can control? Because whether that kid shows up at 5'10", 175 versus 5'10", 135, I think that's a thing that we can control, right?
Sure.
And some of the signal that we send. The thing that I can't control is whether that kid is 5'10", 175 or 6'3", 195.
Sure. And I think a lot like, I would actually go the opposite way from this guy. And like, I would actually agree that a lot of the players that are being handed off to colleges aren't ready for the college baseball game. And I think it's because their travel selecting spent too much time on fielding. So and not enough time on like making sure athletically you can play against grown men.
So weirdly, one of the guys does comment here and goes, a lot of your quote-unquote big brand travel clubs never practice. They fly from all over meeting up to play.
Right.
So
and like not for nothing, I've seen a lot of travel clubs spend way more time on fielding than on athletic development.
Well, I've seen that with my own eyes.
So like if we agree with the premise that like we should be giving better travel should be doing a better job, and high school for moving forth should be doing a better job of providing ready-made college athletes to colleges. I don't disagree. We should be doing a better job of providing athletes who are 18 who could, in theory, compete with guys who are 22, 23, 24.
Yes.
That has nothing to do with fielding and fielding percentages.
Right.
It has everything to do with like what is your athletic makeup and composition, and like can you hit it hard and can you throw it hard? If not, here's a shirt. It's red. You're gonna wear it for at least 1 year.
For at least.
And then, well, I guess you get red shirt for multiple years. But yeah, like you're gonna wear it for a year.
You can have an injury red shirt, you know, like
yeah, but hopefully they don't have the injury. But like you're gonna wear it for at least a year. And what's expected of most redshirt freshmen? Gain weight.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That is like one of the biggest things for redshirt freshmen is like we need you to like develop physically so that you're more ready. And like, yeah, I fully agree, sir. Like we should be doing a better job at providing ready-made college athletes, and that has nothing to do with the amount of games we're playing, or the amount of time we're spending on fielding.
Yeah, I mean, I can devil's advocate the thing, and so like, yeah, I understand what you're saying. The point you're trying to make about there isn't enough time being spent on some of these quote-unquote fundamental baseball skills that are not your hitting skill and your throwing skill and your athletic development skill. And it's like, fine, like I understand that, but consider that for a lot of these kids, there's opportunity cost to all this stuff, right? And there is opportunity cost, I suppose, because you don't have infinite time to maximizing the stuff that you can't control. So if it's a leverage game and a college is more willing to make space on a roster for a kid that has good athletic development and good baseball skills behind it that might be deficient on the glove. Is that a true thing? Is that the signal that we're getting from some of these places? I would offer that the answer is largely yes.
Yes.
So you can't stigmatize coaches like us or people that run organizations like us, and even parents and players out in the ecosystem that are making decisions based on getting that signal.
And the thing I can tell you as a coach is it is much easier to teach someone how to field in a short amount of time, make someone better at fielding in a short amount of time, as opposed to like, you're 160 pounds and I need you to be 190. I can't do that in a month. Right. I can't have this kid outside with a fungo or a machine or whatever and fire 500 baseballs at him.
Come grow 30 pounds.
Right, and make him a better baseball player and make him a better fielder. I can do that with a kid who's already 195 pounds. I can make sure that he sees 5,000 ground balls in the fall so that he's just a better, like it's repetition, right? Like he's a better fielder when he comes, and you can't do repetition for gaining weight and athletic development. And like you lose that time early and it's hard to get back later.
Yep.
And schools would way rather take a kid who's 195 pounds and has, a propensity for kicking some baseballs as opposed to a kid who's 150 pounds, never kicks any balls, but like, hey man, I have to redshirt you for a year.
Yeah.
Whereas the other kid, I may not. Maybe I end up redshirting that kid. Maybe he kind of figures it out with the glove in the fall, and by the time spring rolls around, he's serviceable enough that I'm able to use that bat and that body in my lineup and give him a role on this team, as opposed to like, maybe a bench player, or much more likely like a red shirt, 150 pound, like, hey, you have a role on this team in the future, but like I need you to gain a bunch of weight, and then maybe you don't gain the weight, and then your roster's up to somebody else next year.
Yep. I mean, there's literally a graph in the STS book about like player A and player B at the high school level. One of kids who is deficient at the skill stuff and is good in terms of like game IQ and awareness. The other kid who is above that stuff, but like needs to resolve that game IQ, game awareness stuff. Yeah. I am pretty convicted that like that latter player who already has a skill composition and just needs refinement, that player is on a path to compete for a roster spot. That other player's on a path to be a team manager.
Sure. And like we're talking about like just giving players to college, right? And like we probably should separate the travel and high school because they are two different things.
Sure.
And like high school coaches, by and large, not full-time coaches, right? They're generally going to be teachers, school staff members who are taking that on. Most high schools do not have a whole lot of time to practice before they jump into games and the season starts. So like the kids that I would rather provide to a high school coach are really good athletes who hit it hard and throw it hard. And that high school coach just needs to refine the fielding a little bit.
Because again, you don't have time to do everything, right? Like, and it's fair to say that, again, it's just like, it's risk assessment, right?
But he's got way less time than I do.
Sure.
And it's way easier for him to work on fielding with that kid and team defense than it is to try to get that kid in the weight room when he's got 10 days before the season starts and he's got to start playing games.
Yeah, no shot.
So like, as a travel org, I don't think our job really should ever be to spend a significant amount of, like, we probably are on the same page that like 25% is the maximum we would want to spend on fielding. Because like, I know what we're really good at.
Yeah.
And I know high school coach, if I hand him a kid who's throwing who's hitting the ball 103 miles an hour, if he can't field the baseball, guess what that coach is going to work on for 10 full days before that season starts, and then probably every day as the season goes on.
Yep. And he's going to DH for the amount of time.
And he'll DH until he figures it out defensively,
yes,
right?
Absolutely.
As opposed to like the kid who's like 150 pounds soaking wet, but is a great shortstop. Like,
could be
your role is slightly harder on a high school team because like I can't get you to hit the ball harder or gain weight in the middle of the season.
Yeah, it's it's like people always talk about if you're good they'll find you, right? They're good, they'll find you. And then we talk about this stuff and we go like, hey, well, if you're 15 years old hitting the ball 100, yeah, they're going to find you. Like that's true.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden when we suggest that like that feedback loop exists and it exists on that through line, and it's like, oh well, no, I didn't mean that. I didn't mean that. We're just not a college-ready player. Well, he's 15 years old, hit the ball 100 in this theoretical example.
Right. And like, if you
it's not like we don't have multiple 15-year-olds hit the balls 100 or anything.
Correct. And if like you want to extrapolate this to like professional baseball too, there are guys that get drafted in the top half of the first round every year, who either, like, I'll use Kyle Schwarber as an example because I love Kyle Schwarber, drafted as a catcher. There was not 1 second that anybody thought that guy was going to catch big league games. Now, I believe he actually did have some big league innings behind the plate, but it wasn't going to be ever his primary position. They knew this is a guy we're going to have to move that way down the defensive spectrum. But hey, he hits balls really hard. So
super good hitter.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Right? And like a lot of the guys you see, especially out of high school, get drafted, center fielders, shortstops, the most athletic positions on the field. You do see guys that get drafted as corner guys because they hit the ball hard.
Yep.
And those are the guys that's like, I know we're going to have to figure out your position.
Yeah.
There's always DH at this point now, but like there's always left fields, right? There's always first base in a lot of cases. And they're going to take a guy who hits the ball hard as opposed to like, there might be a team that has picked defensive first baseman in the first round within the last 10 years and it didn't go great.
Yeah.
Because like, you kind of have to be able to hit.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're going to play professional baseball.
Yeah.
So.
Weird. Super weird. Andy Johnson, how do you structure pregame with run, stretch, throw, hitting, plyos, catch play, and fielding? Station work and have the starting pitcher get ready first? Or your mileage may vary. What do you got?
So we do our dynamic. Everyone does it together. Team dynamic warm-up. And then generally, we will immediately jump to hitting plyos.
Right. And we don't jump to throwing first because we don't want to get hot and then just cool.
Right.
And if there is one thing that I just constantly scratch my head about with like watching other teams do warm-ups, it's not even that like they just run polls and they don't do a dynamic. It's not that they just jump straight into throwing, but they do it first.
Mm-hmm.
And then they go out and like get out in center field and do like a bunch of hitters with one coach in the centers throwing a wiffle ball at them. It's like, you guys haven't thrown a baseball in like literally 35, 40 minutes.
Correct.
Like, how is that a good idea?
Correct. And like, I think that was part of the question. I would not have the starting pitcher warm up first or warm up early or whatever because then it's even more time that you're asking that guy to see.
Yeah, you want them to go in a very structured, like, hey, if it's going to take you 25 to get hot, we're going to start you getting hot 25 after the first pitch, right?
Well, so we have our dynamic warm-up, then we all hit hitting plyos.
Yep.
And then it's time to throw. So everybody does J-bands, wrist weights, they do their plyo throwing, and then their long toss. The pitcher and the catcher are going to long toss together like normal, right? They, at the end of long toss, will go to the bullpen. There's generally going to be about 10, 15 minutes before the game when we finish long toss. They're going to go to the bullpen to finish their work and get ready for the game. And everyone else is going to do innie-outie.
Yep.
And then game starts.
Yeah, mixing some EDDs for the innie-outie if you finish early.
Once they finish their long toss, they'll do a little bit of EDD, and then we'll just jump straight into innie-outie, and the pitcher and catcher won't participate in innie-outie. They'll be in the bullpen getting hot.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, again, when I was coaching just on the rec side, that was what we did. We would have everybody go through the dynamic. We'd have everybody do the throwing stuff, and then you kind of just, get into your hitting stations. And, if you have the luxury of having an assistant coach who can do some innie-outie while you get through on the hitting side, then like, hey, now we can increase the rep density a little bit, which is good up until the point that people start getting, dog tired before the game. Don't necessarily want that, so you got to modulate a little bit.
And throwing ball. Right? If you're doing innie-outie, they're going to make a significant. If you hit 30 ground balls to your shortstop, that's 30 throws that he's making in addition to long tossing or whatever. I'm lucky enough to have a second fungal hitter, so we separate infield and outfield and kind of try to increase the reps, but we're only doing innie-outie for 10 total minutes. Right. So like even with increased reps, it's not going to be that many reps at that point.
Steven Sprovach, shout out to you, Steve. With Little League season in the North so short, we have 8 weeks in May and June for 14 games. That gives us 2 weeks to hold 4 preseason practices, and we get 2 practices in season if there are no rainouts. How would you fix the schedule considering that Little League requires a 12-game minimum season? Boy. Steve, where the heck are you that you've got an 8-week schedule? That is short.
That's really short.
So the problem here Okay, how would I fix the schedule? If this is me like waving my magic wand, I would not have your season schedule defined by the Little League All-Star Tournament, because that's what's happening here, right?
Probably.
What's happening is that you are defining kind of like an end date that allows these kids to still be able to participate in All-Star related activities. And you've got teams in Florida that might be starting now. Mm-hmm. You have teams, say for us in the Northwest, are going to start, early March. And you guys, Steve, are not starting until May.
Is it the Great White North?
I'm going to dig. I'll dig a little bit. Steve, where the heck are you? Yeah, it's tough, man. So I guess if I was going to fix this, the first thing I would do is have your seasonal schedule not be defined by the All-Star Tournament. And look, that sucks, right? Because you might have kids who are capable of being able to go out and play All-Stars for Little League, which is its own cool experience for kids, right? We can simultaneously think about Little League All-Stars as something that's like, doesn't really mean anything, but also acknowledge it for like when you're 10, 11, 12, that it's kind of a big deal. I remember the first time that Danny got picked for an all-star team. He literally like ran out of the house and was like running circles in our front yard because he was so fired up about it. So I get that.
The chance to play on ESPN,
sure.
Yes. For sure.
But yeah, man, I mean, this schedule is really, really tough. So I guess the first thing that I would say is, hey, man, if we can, we have to go longer than have baseball be an 8-week schedule. And I don't know.
Even if the games are within the 8-week schedule and we add a couple weeks in April.
Yeah, I mean,
to like just practice and get some general practice in. Trying to extend that schedule somehow is basically the only way.
Yeah, I mean, presumably, if you've got Little League in the area, you probably have youth basketball somewhere in the area, which means you have gyms. And I would rather have kids going into a gym twice a week and doing some throwing stuff into a net. You get some like Smash Factor balls or mini hitting plyos or whatever, and you can still see a moving ball but not worry about putting a baseball through a window. I would find some type of solution to try to get some activity in April that is really specific on the skill side, because you're so constrained in your kind of your competitive calendar. I think that's, and maybe that answer is kind of a cop out. I'm just thinking through it right now that maybe that's a cop out by saying that like, hey, I don't know.
It's a cop out, but it also isn't a cop out because like I don't know that there's another answer there. Like,
yeah, I mean, I think you could probably make the argument that like that amount of abbreviated on-ramp just isn't enough, period. So, in the Great White North, I think you've got to find a way to make friends with the people that are running your local basketball program and try to find a way to like get in a little bit in April. I just think that's the thing. Yeah. Is that if you could, and I know that there's a way that, because I've done it, like I've run clinics and camps and stuff in a gym before. It might end up being a lot more tee work or like side soft into a net, and that's fun, right? You might be hitting Smash Factor fungos. I mean, I did it before we had fungos, before we had Smash Factor balls, so like tennis balls. Like there are ways you can get your work in, and I think because your competitive season is so short, the thing that makes sense is to extend on the front side to try to get more practice in. And then you're playing, small field. Small-sided wiffle ball games, right? Like that's a thing that's a thing you could do. The kids love it. Trust me, I've been there before. That's what I would try to do, and then just allow the competitive season to be the competitive season, because you're kind of constrained in the Great White North.
Yeah, if you constrain it less than that, now you're talking close to there's going to have to be at least 1 week with 3 games.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. So
which is a grind.
Yeah.
Tim. I'm looking for more ideas to make my 12U practices more game-like and competitive. Any thoughts would be great. It's a Skills to Scale Complete Youth Baseball Training Manual. It's right behind Jeremy. You can't see it, but like that's just the thing.
Yeah, we can't give away the secret sauce.
No.
It's in the book.
Well, actually, we kind of give away some of it. If you pull up the Driveline free youth team training program, some of the games that came from the Skills to Scale practice book are in there. It's not really rocket science. Like you have to just kind of come up with some stakes And the idea about all the games in the Skills to Scale book are like a definitive skill that we're trying to develop in a game container that's going to allow that to be stress tested.
Sure.
Like that's the thing. So, I'll give you the way that I would think about doing it. Look at your team, figure out the stuff you want to deal with, figure stuff you want to improve. Okay, what's a game that like serves to improve that skill? Let's say our back to ball skills suck, right? Like we take absolute G hacks all the time and just can't buy a clean barrel. Okay, don't hurt the puppies game. Hit a line drive in the outfield. Fine. You could do small-sided games where you've got one outfielder, right? And anything clear into the green is a point. And if the outfielder makes an out, then that's 3 outs all at once. And then you just rotate and you can have like a 4v4 that way. Like there's a bunch of different ways you can kind of take the game ideas about the stuff that you want to develop and have the game revolve around that attribute that you're trying to solve for. And again, once you tell kids that there's a score, the competitiveness immediately goes up, right? Like there has to be stakes.
I think the thing you have is the most important part is like you have to figure out what you want to develop, like what you want to work on.
Yeah.
Start there and then work backwards of like, okay, how do I gamify doing this? So like,
right.
They're hitting the ball on the ground way too much. We're doing don't hurt the puppies, right? So like, I'm not saying you got to go buy a bunch of stuffed animal puppies, hand them out to the kids, and have them name them before the season. But you could.
You could.
And
Dollar store's your friend.
Yeah, and then, don't kill the puppy that you have named. Like, now there's named puppies in the infield. Like, don't kill your teammate's puppy either, right? Like, now you've
seen the Kingsman, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Now you've, like, gamified this, and so, like, starting with what skill do we need to work on?
Yeah.
That, like, hey, I'm struggling to get my team to get better at this thing in game like reps, game like situations. What is that skill? And then create a points-based system off of it, and like have fun with it.
Yeah, and you can apply the same concepts on the throwing side. I was just thinking, we have we have some bullpen throwing games that are on the Driveline Youth YouTube that you can just like check out that video. Think about it, right? If you've got a team of 12 kids. Let's say you have 6 pitchers and 6 catchers. So that means you have 2 pods of 3 on each side.
Mm-hmm.
It's a 20-pitch scripted bullpen. Every pass ball is -1 point. Every strike is +1 point. Everybody gets work, and everybody gets the work that you need, right? Like, and the winning team gets to pick the game activity, like the hitting game activity you're going to finish with, whether that's, I don't know, whatever, there's a bunch of it. But yeah, the book is the simplest thing because it's going to give you, I think, the contextual framework for how to think about the development of the thing that you want to improve and then a container that's going to maximize for that. My guy Hoots, shout out to Hoots from Down Under. How do you balance skill development with strategy and game simulation during practice? That's a good one. He's got a couple, so we can tackle these one at a time. I would say that the strategy side of things, to me, is more putting him in a competitive environment where that strategy is going to show itself, and then taking the 10 to 30 seconds when you see a decision being made that can be approved. Hey, why was the choice to go there, right? Why did you throw to third instead of second? Right?
To me, it's all about like separating and block training.
Yes.
Right. So like, there's a time and a place to work on the skill development of hitting the ball harder and just like increasing your exit velo. And then maybe you do that in November, December. When you flip the schedule to January as you're getting closer to games, now the message we're sending to kids is less about exit velocity and making sure you PR, and like we will still have kids PR.
Sure.
And the message is more, okay, approach, hey, this cage is 2 strikes on you.
Yeah.
And like constantly reiterating that like a win in November, December is a top 8th exit velocity or PR. Those are the wins then. Then once you flip to January, the wins are, hey, I fouled off a nasty pitch with 2 strikes, or I fouled off this fastball at the top of the zone with 2 strikes, or there's a runner on second with nobody out, and like a win is I went backside.
Yeah.
Right? And then in that situation, you can hit the ball, you can hit a PR, and if it was a ground ball to shortstop, you don't get a point there.
Right.
Right? So like gamifying it based on the time of year, there's a time of year to work on strategy and a time of year to work on skill development.
Yeah.
It's difficult to try to do them at the exact same time.
Yeah.
Because the kids are going to inherently focus on one more than the other. And it is, if you're a kid, why would you focus on hitting a ball backside as opposed to a green number that shows up on hit tracks or a PR or whatever it is, right? Like, if you give them both things to focus on, they're always going to focus on, like, getting the highest number. If you change that focus to, like, stay alive in the at-bat, hit the ball, go backside, whatever it is, you should be able to work on strategies that way as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Generally, I don't know that it should be an intention to PR in like a live AB, right?
No.
Like that's really not the gig.
Unless it's 2-0, 3-0, 3-1, sure. when like that is what I'm. And like, to be clear, I coach two approaches. There's a 2-strike approach and a not 2-strike approach, like a leverage count and not a leverage count.
Yep.
Everything to me is a leverage count unless you have 2 strikes. And I want you getting your ace swing off. I want you to try to PR.
Yeah.
Right? That changes depending on the situation.
Yeah. So
if there's a runner on second and nobody out, it is more important to me that you hit the ball backside and move that runner than you hit it hard. Now, if we're talking 13-year-olds, hit the ball hard, man. If you hit it hard, that shortstop might not be able to field it. Yeah. Right? Or like a lot of times, ground ball, like the younger you are, ground ball to short, is going to move that runner because they're probably going to throw all the way across the diamond and then you can easily take them. Right? Strategy probably only really comes into play for us as they get older.
Yeah.
Like, we're not going to work on that with them until they're 14 and get onto a big field because that's not the way we want to win games. We don't care about winning games because we go backside more than other teams or because we, God forbid, we bunked or like we play situational defense or whatever it is. The way we want to win, if in so much as we want to win, is, hey, we hit the ball harder and we threw the ball harder.
Yes. Yeah. And again, to this earlier thing about like, are you developing, college ready baseball players? It's like, I don't want my strategy for coaching 12-year-olds to be defined by the assumption that they need to present that way. I have zero interest in that, like literally none. Okay. Who says another one? How do you handle varying skill levels within the team during practice? I will tell you that running my own teams in years previous, it was very trying to answer that question is defined by the amount of labor that you have.
Yeah.
I could, if I had the labor to run stations, then I would talk to my labor staff of parent helpers or whatever about how they are either hey, Tommy, Timmy, Katie's group, they can do side soft, right, for the outfield home run derby, right? Outfield home run derby with mini hitting plyos. Those kids are just fine there. Billy, Spencer, and Judas, I don't know where that came from.
Sure.
Those kids, hey, you can do side soft with them, but none of them hit the ball very hard. So I'm going to have 2 home plates set up in the outfield. Have them use the closer.
Sure.
Right? Because a line drive is a line drive, and for one group of those kids, that line drive could be a home run from 30 yards away from the fence.
Sure.
That other group, hey, let's move it in 25, 20 yards maybe.
Sure.
Because I want them to cultivate the same intention of the action, but I'm acknowledging that you're doing a little bucketing to try to make that palatable.
Sure. Indoors, we don't turn down machines. There's a disparity on every team. You're not going to ever have a team, I shouldn't say ever, but very rarely are you going to have a team that doesn't have any, everybody's the same. Everyone has equal talent. Everyone, needs to see the same velocity or whatever. And you're never going to be able to choose the lower end because then you either, you're not going to develop the upper end, or they leave because they're bored because I want to see harder pitching or I want to see more difficult environment, whatever it is. You're better off putting the kids at the bottom end of that scale into the deeper end of the pool. And then just providing them with support and context as to hey, if you're struggling more than your teammate, that's okay.
Yeah.
It's about the work in the end and the grind and you're going to get there. We've seen it time and time again.
Yeah.
And I've seen 13-year-olds barrel 80 miles an hour, 85 miles an hour from machines. They just have to feel like they can do it.
Yeah.
In a lot of cases, and it takes them a while. You have to be comfortable with watching them fail for a little bit with the lower skilled players.
Yeah.
And if you're not willing to do that, they're just not going to stay in the game.
Yeah, I mean, and you're going to have to be active about defining what success looks like for those kid or that particular kid throughout that journey, right? Like I'm thinking about a kid on your 16s whose swing has changed massively in the last like year and a half or whatever. And at the beginning of this off season, when we started hitting in like August and September, it wasn't going great, right? But like I know that I was around, like we were around the cages, and we gave that kid a lot of like, he might foul a ball off, right? He might foul one straight back and be like, dude, it's right there.
Yeah.
It's right there. And I'm going to try to communicate how fired up I am about a foul ball so that kid understands that like he's still on a path, right? Like I think you can burn some calories there and help. Because the perfect world, right, where a kid like walks into a cage and they like scan a QR code and the machine automatically like moves to their competitive velocity, right? And it like we're not there yet, right? We're just not there yet, and trying to burn a bunch of calories to try to solve something like that for every single one of your kids on your team is going to be so technologically complex. You're missing opportunities to do other things, trying to solve for that one specific deficiency instead of being really confident and comfortable giving the kid context that like, hey, we're making progress.
Yeah,
Progress might be a good swing that missed the ball. Progress might be a foul ball. It's progress.
You're competing with yourself.
Yes.
And challenges in that environment where you're competing with yourself, challenges are good.
Yes. What is your method for reviewing and learning from past games to improve future performance? I mean, to me, method is just like you have to decide when you're reviewing these games, like what it is that's important to you. Like that's the first thing. And if you don't have any definition around that other than we wanted to win and we didn't, then like you don't know where to find the right answers.
Yes. So like I can walk you through mine. I am very aware that physical errors happen, and I don't care.
Explain that. Because I think a lot of people are going to be like, what is a physical error?
Booting a ball,
okay,
throwing it away, like, you're a shortstop, you feel the ball, and then you make an error throwing it to first base. Okay. Things that go in the stat sheet generally as E's, those, they know. The kid knows. It doesn't do any good to harp on it over and over again. Right. Like they already did it publicly. They already generally feel bad about it.
Yeah.
Sure, there's a level to which okay, this kid keeps doing it over and over again, and it's the same mistake because he refuses to, correct X, Y, Z. Sure, that's a different scenario. But the things that I care about on a game-to-game basis, and I will, every one of our games is recorded on Game Changer.
Yep.
Our scrimmages are recorded.
Yep.
I will go back and I pull clips from our scrimmages and games that reflect poor attitude, poor effort, and that's basically it.
And that poor effort and even poor attitude can inform a physical mistake, right?
Sure, right? Like a lot of times, poor attitude, I will classify missing your cut as poor attitude.
Yeah.
Because your attitude was, I could get that guy at home, and I'm gonna be selfish here and not be a team guy.
And you throw a 7-hopper.
Or you just miss him entirely. Sure. The guy's safe at home, and you give up an extra 90 feet.
Yeah.
Right? And that's to me, that's not a physical error. Doesn't go in the stat sheet as an E. But those are, if you clean those up, the physical errors, you make 2-3 of them a game, they're not going to kill you. Yeah. It's you make those and then you make all these attitude and effort related errors. You're not, you're frustrated because you rolled over a ground ball and you don't run it out hard to first, and they miss a throw, but they still have time to get back and tag the base because you didn't run hard. That's 90 feet. Right? So that's what I always highlight and break down from game to game, is those kind of things. Attitude, effort, process things, as opposed to you swung and missed on here, or, you kicked this ball, you made an error. Right. And sure, I will give an example. One of them that I highlighted this year during one of our scrimmages was a ball that got kicked at second. And I made sure in the video clip, because I talked through it and circle things for the kids, that is not what I'm upset about. What I'm upset about is then you pick up the ball and you throw it away.
Yeah.
We've already made one error.
Yeah, you compound
Don't compound it with a bad attitude throw because you're pissed that you made the first error.
Yeah.
Right? Things like that, you clean those things up on a game-to-game basis. The physical errors, the kick balls, you can practice as much as you want. You can yell at your kids as much as you want. It's still going to happen.
Still going to happen.
Still going to happen. And like if you clean up a lot of the other stuff, you're going to win a lot more games. And like that is where I would suggest you spend most of your focus on a game to game if you want to do like film review or whatever that is. That's what I generally focus on, always focus on, is that kind of stuff. And changing the way they're thinking about those types of things. In most cases, a kid rolling over a ball and not running hard at first, he doesn't realize, really, maybe he does like deep down, but like he doesn't realize that he's not actually running hard at first. Or that he spent too much time looking at the ball and that he could have been safe if he didn't.
Sure.
Showing him the video
Yeah.
is a different, like then it's a whole nother, oh, my attitude was bad. My effort level was really bad in that because I didn't run that out hard. Whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Those are the things that I would spend more time on if your team is playing with really competitive, strong attitude and everybody is giving high level effort. Who cares about kicking a couple balls? It's gonna happen. It happens at the big league level. It happens at the happens all the time.
Yeah.
We'll bring our segment back soon. We're starting spring training games. Like everybody makes errors. It's what type of errors are you willing to put up with?
Yeah. Yeah, and again, asking that process question about like did that process lead us to bad outcome here is a totally valid thing. Who's got one more for us? How do you measure the effectiveness of each station in terms of player development? Man, to me, it's just you gotta have a score. You gotta keep score. You gotta have something that you are going to get an indicator about like what that's going to be. Now, I will acknowledge that I don't think we do a perfect job of that, right? Like it's not like every time a kid is throwing plyos on the wall that there's someone behind them that's like taking notes and scoring whether they got in that head high arm centaur.
Sure.
If we marshaled Driveline's resources to coach one team instead of however many that we have, then like maybe that's a thing.
But we have teams that again don't track every single throw, but like if that's a thing we're not very good at, we are going to pay way more attention to
100%.
that, and like we're going to track
things
along those lines.
Yeah. Okay, Levi's got one for us here. Then we'll go to our Driveline plus friends. How do you split in-season practice time between skills at scale with traditional game skills? I think we already talked about that. I mean, even in season, I'm still probably 75% on the skill side, 25% on the tactical execution stuff. If you have to, and look, I suppose you can also pivot off of there, right? Like, as if you see that there are substantial tactical issues that are holding you back, then maybe you take a little bit less time on the hitting side because, hey, we're competitive in the box, but we're losing games because we're not aggressive enough on the base pass. Like, you can pivot, right? Like, that's fine.
For sure. And, like, I would classify them as, like, that demoralizing tactical mistakes. Because, we don't we're not going to ever make choices based on winning and losing, but, like, it does matter how you lose.
Yeah.
And, like, honestly, I've been through it. There's not a whole lot worse than, like, hitting the ball harder and throwing the ball harder than the other team. And, like, we lost because we couldn't squeeze it.
Couldn't execute. Yeah.
Right. And, like, they're, like, first baseman dropped some balls, catcher dropped some balls. And, like, now a team that we know we are more talented than beat us because we didn't do the little things well. Those things add up. And it makes the game less fun for kids. They don't want to play it as much. And, like, we're here to make sure kids continue to play baseball as long as possible. So, like, there comes a point where, like, you do have to, if it's like that, where if every game is just, like, demoralizing tactical issues, and, like, no matter how hard you're hitting it and how hard you're throwing it, you are not able to win games because you cannot feel the ball, you cannot run the bases, you cannot hold runners on, whatever that is. Sure, man, I would flip that maybe 100% tactical and 0% skill in that category. Like, there are sliders that you can play with. Again, it depends on what is the most important thing to you. I would posit, depending on your age, it should be keeping these kids wanting to play baseball longer.
Having fun, yep.
And there is a point where, like, it shouldn't be losing that ruins fun, but, like, there is a way in which you can lose that will ruin that fun. You're getting mercy every game, whatever it is. You're going to have to spend a little bit more time on the tactical stuff. If you spend the right amount of time on the skill side stuff, it's really hard to get blown out of a game if you hit it harder and throw it harder. You're going to lose a lot of close, trust me, you're going to lose a lot of close one-run games.
Ask us how we know.
And they're going to keep you awake at night. But, like, you aren't necessarily going to get blown out a ton. And, like, those are competitive losses need to be okay. You're never going to win all your games. Your goal should be to get mercied as few amount of times as possible.
Yeah, for sure. And then Levi has a follow-up here. Tips for communicating the idea of external cueing as opposed to internal cueing to more traditional parents. I'll solve this one for you.
There you go.
Levi, since I have a camera for you here, internal cueing is bad for you. First of all, kids are not small adults, so whatever kinesthetic amount of awareness that you have as an adult that allows you to kind of think about that type of stuff, your child isn't a small adult. They're not you. So like tomato, potato, these two things are not applicable. Secondarily, with some of the best athletes in the world, we still do a majority of external cue focus because it allows their body to have a path towards solving a problem instead of focusing on the path itself. And if you realize that that's applicable for the best athletes in the world, do you think it's any less applicable for children who, again, they're not small adults? They're bad at controlling their bodies. That's like the thing that differentiates them against adults.
Sure.
So, look, man, I understand, the Instagram parent who sees videos of Tony Gwynn or whoever talking about hitting or somebody talking about throwing, and they get super, super, super internal, meaning they're talking about the actual physical execution of their bodies. But like, since the first paper about like external cueing was published, I think in like 1979, like sport coaches have been on this path for a long time. And it's largely like, honestly, I'm pretty sure that baseball is one of the worst sports about this focus on need for internal cueing.
Yeah, it's probably true.
It's a very old game, and people have like a romantic attachment to the way that it was taught because it suggests a lot of stuff about the time that their lives were vibrant and evergreen and the future was in front of them, and then we're knocking on death's doorstep. Well, guess what? We're all going to die someday. And do you want to die being a crappy baseball player because of internal cues?
What I was going to say is I would, and like I could be very off with this analogy, but I'm going to make it anyways. Word problems are a thing in math.
Yeah.
Because it's easier for a kid to understand like a story and be able to like understand how to get there from a story as opposed to just like, here's two numbers, solve it.
Yeah.
Right? Like word problems are now a thing for like you pick up a math textbook and like everything's a word problem with random names thrown at it and like, yeah. Johnny leaves this place at this time and Sally leaves this place at this time going X miles an hour.
Yep.
You know, that could just be numbers on a page. It's way easier for kids to understand and wrap their heads around it being a word problem.
Yeah.
My analogy here is like, giving an external cue is the story that you're trying to tell the kid as opposed to like, this is the inputs to the story that I need you to, these are the numbers that I need you to solve.
Yeah. Yeah. And
they're just going to be better at solving that problem if they are able to understand that problem a little bit better.
And even, to drill one level down, when I'm communicating to a child about the physical configuration of their bodies, the first thing that is going to fail there is if they understand the words that I'm using.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If I say hit the ball over there, the odds that we are misunderstood are incredibly low.
Yeah.
Hey, you just try to throw to the catcher and you zoot it 4 feet over his head. Aim lower.
Yeah.
Are we misunderstood? No. Okay, what's the opposite of that? The opposite of that is Google snap load the power package, right? Pull up that video, which is a farcical attempt to illustrate how bad internal cueing is in golf, and then multiply that by 1,000 in baseball because you have to hit a moving target. And it's never in the same place at the same time. Our game is a game of adaptability and variability. And if you think the solution to that is putting a ball on a tee and getting hyper-focused on the physical execution of your body and execution of that task, then like, good luck, but the task doesn't represent the game.
Well, and the last thing I'll say before we can move on to the next question is their body will change over time.
Yes.
So the internal cue that you're using right now, if it works and they become attached to it, might then be harder to program out when they grow and they need a different internal cue because they're now thinking about this one thing and it's difficult to think about a second thing. So like just continuing to say the same task over and over again, how their body is going to solve that task will change over time.
Yeah.
But the task won't change over time.
Yes, it will.
So it's much easier for the kids to grasp onto that and then use that as they grow, as opposed to grasping onto what every part of their body should be doing at a specific time, only for that to change a year and a half later when their bodies are different.
Correct. If you think the solution to having, or the path for your child to have like a successful hitting experience in baseball is to perfectly move like Tony Gwynn when they're 12, and then you're never going to have to change that, like, good luck.
Good luck.
Don't work that way.
Yep.
All right, Driveline Plus. Michael Hudson, how would you organize winter workouts and practices where you can only practice once a week to best prepare for the upcoming season? This is due to kids' other practice obligations and space limitations. Focus being preparing the arm for the season and arm health. So first of all, Michael, you're 100% right in terms of your focus. I think if you are stuck with a place where you can only practice once a week, I think the first thing I'm trying to do is incentivize and plead and beg with those kids to go play catch with mom or dad some other day during the week.
Well, so my first question based on hearing that is, he said other practice commitments, yeah?
Yeah. So
What's that look like?
Well, he's talking about winter, right? So he's organizing winter workouts. So maybe we're finishing the basketball season, right? Maybe we're finishing soccer, football. I mean, I don't know. But I think that could be the thing that they're dealing with.
Whatever it is, what does their workload look like there?
Yeah.
And then, if it's football and they're playing quarterback. I mean, not every single one of these kids are going to play quarterback, but like, if it's another baseball team, that's a different thing, right? Like, yes, I would highly incentivize them to like play catch every day, and then we can throw high intent the one day a week we have them, as long as they've been building up some sort of workload by playing catch every day. But like, that would be my first question: is like, what is it? A similar other commitment for all the athletes?
Yeah. Do
they vary? Do we have a wide ranging amount of abilities and commitments on this team of being able to throw during the week, or like, am I going to have half this team that can throw every single day and the other half that literally can only throw this one time a week? Because then I'm splitting the group in two, and one of them's doing recovery days, and the other one is probably going to throw a little bit higher.
Yeah, there was a question I answered for somebody in the Plus Slack about a week ago who's kind of in that same boat. Is that he had 3 days a week with these group, but some of them were adding in, and he structured it the way that we structure stuff. So it was a recovery day, a hybrid day, and then a higher intent day. But then he had kids between the hybrid day and the high intent day who were going to do pitching lessons.
Sure.
And I was like, look, this sucks. But the reality is that like if you can't control what that high intent day looks like for these kids doing that pitching lesson, because it probably is going to be a high intent day because it's a pitching lesson,
it's a pitching lesson. There's no way it's not. Then
you don't have any option other than to down regulate your day of training when you do get those kids subsequent to that pitching lesson day.
Correct.
And then it's kind of a crappy answer in terms of the circumstance it creates, because now you have to go back to these parents and say like, hey, remember that choice that you made where you said we're going to be with me 3 days a week, and then you layered in that other thing? Well, now I have to change my thing because it's my job to keep these kids healthy.
If I were doing a one size fits all,
it
would be a recovery long toss day with a lot of hitting.
Yeah. Try that. So recovery. So we're basically still getting some patterning benefit on that side of things. Long toss, try to create a little bit of volume, even at lower intent, but then just kind of acknowledge like the ability to do anything developmentally progressive in that configuration of 1 day a week. It's like you can't. You can.
Nope.
Chance Morton, Chance is the man. With especially the 12 and under groups in tournament play, are you still using a continuous batting order? I did continuous on Saturdays, even rolling it from tournament to tournament, and then my best lineup, still batting everyone on Sundays. Also, with that age group, how much are guys moving around in the field in the inning, game to game? We talked about that a lot. I think we can punt that one to the side. For 12 and under in tournament play, about CBO, I will tell you I have some lived experience here, and it's tough. What we advocate for, at least in the book, right, is kind of splitting the season into two phases. And this is, I think you can do this in the travel side too. It's a development phase and then a competition phase. And the point of the development phase is to probably do something that's tantamount to CBO. Try to maximize the amount of opportunities equally across everybody. Try to figure out what your best lineup is. And then when you are in those circumstances where you have to go win a baseball game, then you run the best version of your lineup. Chance, what I would advocate for is I would probably do that over the course of a whole season, right? Probably doing a little bit CBO early to try to figure out what that looks like. And what you really want to do is you want to get the kids and the parents to the point that they believe that when you roll out the best lineup, that they understand why that is the lineup that it is.
Sure.
Right? That everybody's kind of bought in that this is the best configuration of what we have, because we've seen kind of what the opportunity looks like when it's distributed equally.
Sure. What I would say, having done this.
Yeah.
Is like I still probably would advocate for like, in pool play, do continuous at that age, and then once you get to bracket play, then you can kind of go to one lineup.
Yeah.
What I will say I learned from this. What is the goal of the continuous batting order?
Equalize opportunity.
Equalize opportunity. That's what I'm assuming is as close to equal at bats for every kid as possible.
Yes.
Okay.
I think that's. Typically that's how I approach it. And I think that's how parents understand it.
Sure. If you have a continuous batting order and one game ends because your 5 hitter got out 10 the game, and the next game starts, you got 12 with hitters 6 through 12.
Yep.
By the time you get to that third inning, it might be 8-0. By the time your best hitter ever gets up to the plate.
Right.
And then you might get mercied with everybody getting one at bat.
Yep. That's real.
There is like a lot of value in hitting your best players first to extend the game and play more innings. Yeah. Therefore, everyone gets more at bats.
Yeah.
Right. Like I have seen both sides of that, and I don't really know where I would stand. I guess it would depend on the team and like how big the split between the top and the bottom of the order is. But like your goal in equal opportunity should also be to play as many innings as possible. And you have to understand that like that you run a much higher chance of getting mercy to run off that field in 3-4 innings, running a continuous batting lineup and hitting maybe your lesser batters at the top of a lineup during a game.
Yeah.
And as long as you are understanding of that, like maybe you frame it so like when your best pitcher is going, I'm okay putting my worst hitters at the top of the lineup.
Sure, because you feel like you can
it's going to be it's going to be a relatively tight game going into the third inning anyways, because my best pitcher can probably keep the other team scoreless for 2 innings. And then if I scratch across a run with the bottom of my lineup, I'm in pretty good position once the top of my lineup rolls around.
Yeah.
But like there is definitely something to like you, especially at that age, and especially in tournament play, when the focus for everybody in tournament play is mercying the other team so that you can save innings
as fast as possible.
You absolutely run the risk of getting mercied with at least one of your best players never hitting.
Yeah.
You could get mercied with 9 guys coming to the plate.
Oh yeah.
And if it's the guys that come to the plate are like 5 through 12 or 5 through 13 of your lineup, and you just got mercied without your top 3 or 4 hitters ever taking an at bat, I would posit that is worse than the top half of your lineup getting 2 at bats and a couple of guys at the bottom getting 1.
Yeah, it stinks.
So there's not like a right answer there. I would do it on a case-by-case basis. Maybe schedule the top of your lineup again, or the bottom of your lineup to hit at the top against a lesser opponent. This is what consolation games are really good for.
Oh, here we go. I played some Little League lineups. So here's a game in June that like we were winning, like we were trying to win, and it was this was a league championship game, and it is basically stacked from top to bottom.
This is mine?
No, this is mine from 2019. High on base percentage, power, and average, power, and then diminishing from that point, because it's like I gotta get the best that I can out of like when the top half of my roster gets on, I need to feel reasonably confident that the player coming after them has got a chance to either advance them or score a run. I know that season that when I was running CBO early, I would have the initial, like the first lineup that I would set and everything with CBO off of that was almost like developmental player, competitive player, developmental player, competitive player. So that even in that CBO configuration, I'm trying to make sure we don't get mercied, right? Or we don't have to roll innings as best you can, right? Because I think you're right that like, rolling a CBO with the intention of getting as equalized opportunity as possible, and then you get mollywopped and you're off in 3. That doesn't serve the purpose.
It doesn't serve the purpose of what you're trying to do.
Yeah. Chance also said he's coaching 2 10U teams, running practices together because of limited time and space. There's a pretty massive skill gap between the top of one team and the bottom of the other. How do you optimize for developing both groups within the same practice? I think we kind of covered that. It's just like you can, depending on how you're doing it in terms of like station design, maybe you can modify some of the sliders there. I think it's honestly easier to modify some of those sliders when you're outdoors rather than in. To be honest, about how you can run on-field practices and kind of triage that stuff a little bit. But the issue with those kids that need development in that space is if you dumb it all the way down for them, they're not adapting to the thing that they need.
And kids are pretty observant.
Yeah.
They can see when they're getting a different set of drills or whatever the case is. What I would say is the best thing to do in this situation is change. The only thing you should change is the definition of success.
Yeah.
For one group, set a higher bar. For the next group that goes, the threshold for success is less high.
Yeah, for sure. Garrett, how would you recommend the power and underload smash bats be used in season for a 12-year-old? Great question. I would do this. With the power bat, try to make sure you're getting enough dosage of that during the week to either maintain or continue to develop bat speed. That means integrating it in practice, integrating into some of your pregame hitting. If you don't have practices, I think you can still get plenty of effective dose on that side.
Yeah.
Crazy idea. I would have the Youth Underload Smash bat either be used in your pregame stuff so that you can still focus on the bat to ball skill in addition to moving fast. I also love it as an on deck warm up bat. Potentiation, baby. That's literally like a research proven thing that kind of works. Just let him take G hacks in the on deck circle with the Youth Underload Smash. That's I mean, it's already at the field with you, right? Like if you brought it for your pregame stuff, you're running a station in your pregame where it's like mini hitting plyos and Youth Underload Smash, soon to be the pregame mini hitting plyos, because that's the thing we've set to production. Then you're running that station, but like the bat's there.
Yeah.
Just have that be your on deck bat. Don't use a flippin' donut also. Donuts are bad. Bad. Don't do that. Research.
Unless you eat them. Like those kind of, I endorse those kind of.
Please. Yes. I like eating a donut and swinging the Youth Underload Smash bat in your on deck.
Great use of time.
Pretty elite.
Great use of time.
Pretty elite.
I may bring a box of donuts, and whenever we face a team that is using donuts this year, I may just have my kids go to the on deck circle and smash a donut.
So gas and put Krispy Kreme in the help receipts. And then this is the last one. This really isn't a question, but it's a good comment, and I wanted to get into it. So Dave says, "I know you guys are not big on mechanical fixes for youth!" Dave, I'm not sure that that's actually accurate, but we'll talk about that. I have 10U travel team that a lot of kids start with their hands first before they hips fire when hitting. Obviously, they leave a lot of X velocity on the table as they're technically 3/4 loaded or half loaded when firing off their swings. What drills do you recommend? Okay. In terms of drills, I think that's the easiest thing to solve here. And I think if what we're trying to do is just to get a kid to get their hands loaded, then like some version of the poppy drills, right? Where we're kind of like getting the hands back, getting the leg up, and then go. Some version of poppy and probably step backs, because I would want to see that load from the poppy position to translate into like the step back move where we're actually kind of taking a little bit more of a full swing, right? That's the simple side of things. I think the one thing, Dave, that I would just push back about is this idea that we're not big on mechanical fixes, because the reality is that like whether we're talking about hitting drills or throwing drills, the only reason we do them is to drive towards mechanical adaptation.
Right.
So are we in on mechanical fixes? Like, no. Do we want to drive mechanical adaptation? Yes. Right? And I think what we're talking about is like the way that this idea of like a fix is implemented, which again, to kind of come back to like the internal cueing thing, it's exactly that, right? It's casting aspersions toward whatever mechanical flaw that a kid has, like making them acutely aware of that flaw, and then like physically manipulating them to try to like not have that flaw, as if that's how they're going to move in competition. Don't do that.
Yeah.
Like, don't do that.
Yeah. Adaptation versus fix, I think, is like the best way to like drive that point home. Is like you can't, and like this is the lesson model of like the fact that you think you can fix something.
Yes.
Like that.
Yes.
Right. And we joke about it all the time. Like, oh, I fixed this kid.
Yeah.
Like I fixed him tonight.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Just totally, he's never gonna have that problem again. Like,
Yeah.
not gonna, even 4 or 5 months down the line, that problem's not gonna pop up. He's not gonna fall back into bad habits. Driving mechanical adaptations and adapting their muscle memory is the only way to get long-term fixes.
Yep.
If you want a bunch of short-term fixes, we're not the place for you. Our goal is long-term fixes, and that is through adaptation.
And the whole point of long-term fixes is that, like, they become systemic. You know, like that's the point. You know, like Danny and I have talked a lot about staying middle on his bat and ball objective to resist coming off it and get a little bit spinny on the pull side, but also being able to like stay middle so that when he goes, he can really go and fire all of it, right? Like, because the whole point is trying to get good at moving fast.
Right.
If you get there too early, you're like, crap, I don't want to hit this ball like pull side into the left field parking lot. Then like maybe we're slowing down. Hey, stay middle.
Right. And
stay middle is still going to generate a crap ton of pull side contact, and that's great.
Correct.
That's great. We're just shifting the intention to try to drive the adaptation.
Yes. And like,
that's the thing that, you know, actually lasts.
A fix implies something is broken.
Well, right.
And like, you don't have to tell kids anything that they're doing is broken. They're kids, they're developing, they're trying to learn how to do this. Use drills to adapt their movements instead of just like telling them their movements are broken.
Yeah. So I think a substantial enough dose of the poppy drill, which I believe you can find on Driveline's YouTube page, is like a big walkthrough on that. Is going to get them into like that actual like full hands loaded position. I would mix that in with something that allows them to kind of like blend the linear into the rotational. So whether you're doing step backs, Happy Gilmore's, I mean, something walkthroughs, right? Something allows you to kind of like, okay, I'm doing this, I'm getting my hands loaded from a static position. Now can I like step back into my load?
Yeah, I would say like flow drill would be good for this.
Yeah. I don't know that we actually have a flow drill video up anywhere. But idea behind flow drill is kind of start with the bat out here, almost like Ichiro, like, right? And just flow into your load position. Yeah. That's, you know, that is something that might be a little bit technically challenging for like a 10. So that's kind of why, you know, but hey, if you've got some 10s, challenges are good. And I would imagine, honestly, that like, whether it's a step back or the flow drill, if you have something that's connecting like a static position like the poppy into an actual swing, that again, you are going to drive a mechanical adaptation. Like you're just going to. And you might have to drive another one in 6 months.
Yep.
Because they're 10.
You will. You will have to drive.
Well, actually, it's not, you might. You will.
Yeah, you will have to drive.
It's 100,000% true. I got anything else? You got nothing else? I got nothing else. Okay. Axbet.com, code DL20, which was something.
Disambiguous loop-to-loop?
Yeah.
Discombobulated
loop-to-loop 20 will get you 20% off at axbet.com. All that other stuff we talked about. For Driveline products and services, you can find at drivelinebaseball.com or 425-523-4030. Support at drivelinebaseball.com. That's all the things. Rest in peace, my friend Jenny. Rest in peace, my Aunt Donna. Fuck cancer. He's Jeremy. I'm Devin. We're down by law. Catch you next time. Thanks. Bye.